Jewish Channel's Week in Review. The 10-letter word damaging Israeli-U.S. relations and the more substantive argument behind it, a famed Nazi hunter brought to the stage, and more of the Jewish news that's changing your world right now in this episode of the Week in Review. Hello, and welcome to the Jewish Channel's Week in Review. I'm Stephen I. Weiss. This week, a 10-letter word containing a 4-letter word became part of political discourse, representing the fiery rhetoric in the relationship between the administrations of President Barack Obama and Israeli Prime Minister Benjamin Netanyahu. Yes, we have now reached a stage where front pages and broadcasts share the uncensored word chicken expletive, referring to Netanyahu. The quote came from a piece by The Atlantic's Jeffrey Goldberg, in which he quoted an anonymous senior Obama administration official saying, "The thing about Bibi is he's a chicken expletive." Further down in the article, Goldberg let that administration official expand on his comments, saying, quote, "The good thing about Netanyahu is that he's scared to launch wars. The bad thing about him is that he won't do anything to reach an accommodation with the Palestinians or with the Sunni Arab states. The only thing he's interested in is protecting himself from political defeat. He's not Yitzhak Rabin. He's not Ariel Sharon. He's certainly no Menachem Begin. He's got no guts." This is now the chicken expletive political crisis, with Americans arguing that Netanyahu is more concerned about winning elections than winning peace, and the Netanyahu camp arguing that the Obama administration is not concerned enough about threats like a nuclear Iran. And there is ample reason to believe at least some of what both sides have to say, as Netanyahu has recently made a push for early elections to consolidate his power base and avoid contention around issues like Israeli-Palestinian peace efforts and ultra-Orthodox controversies, while the Obama administration's approach to an Iranian nuclear deal has seen sanctions loosen somewhat and let negotiation and other deadlines slip away in the meantime. But digging deeper into Goldberg's piece, one can see the groundwork being laid for a more serious and substantive shift in the American-Israeli relationship than just name-calling. Goldberg, who wrote this piece after consulting many administration officials, wrote, "By next year, the Obama administration may actually withdraw diplomatic cover for Israel at the United Nations. In recent years here at TJC, we've been reporting on the warning signs of just such an event, as the preferred policy of the Netanyahu administration has over several years leaked votes at the United Nations. Where Israel once had dozens of votes in the General Assembly supporting its chosen policy, it has in recent years fallen to fewer than 10 votes. Almost all major Western democracies have not been on the Netanyahu administration's side of late. It stands to reason that there is only so long that the United States will be willing to be truly alone among major Western democracies in supporting the Israeli government's preferred policies." And this reporting by Goldberg is something of a warning shot from anonymous Obama administration officials that the end is coming for that approach. More and more, the approach preferred by Israeli leadership in the form of Netanyahu and the approach preferred by Israelis in the form of voting for successive Netanyahu governments is to be willing to go it alone, shedding diplomatic alliances in the West. But there's also a sign of some internal pressure in Israel to shift its approach. More than 100 retired Israeli army generals, Mossad directors, and national police commissioners have signed a letter urging Netanyahu to, quote, "initiate a diplomatic process for peace with the Palestinians along the lines of the so-called Saudi Initiative, a peace proposal adopted by the Arab League in 2002. But speaking of internal shifts, here in America, the Jewish community continues a shift toward orthodoxy. As revealed in the latest census of Jewish day schools from the Avichai Foundation, 861 Jewish day schools now teach 255,000 students from the pre-kindergarten level through 12th grade. That's a 12% increase from just 5 years ago. And the largest source of that growth is the ultra-Orthodox, who now represent 60% of enrollment. And amid declining enrollment for the non-Orthodox overall, just 13% of students are enrolled in non-Orthodox Jewish day schools. Moving on, a new off-Broadway play looks at the life of Nazi hunter Simon Wiesen Thal. Meredith Gansman reports in a segment from our theater show, Row J.
After the defeat in World War I, such a people poor and
why would Tom Dugan, self-described as an Irish Catholic kid from New Jersey, write a play about Simon Wiesen Thal? Theater producer Darryl Roth knows.
For me, his greatest legacy was his teaching, his sharing of the message of tolerance with countless young visitors at his Jewish documentary center in Vienna. Simon Wiesen Thal, too, was truly an ordinary man who did extraordinary things. Love it.
Known as the Jewish James Bond, Simon Wiesen Thal dedicated his life to finding Nazi war criminals who were hiding all over the world, bringing over 1,100 to justice. At a special preview of his show Wiesen Thal, Open now at the Theater Row Acorn Theater, Tom Dugan said the Nazi hunter's greatest tool was humor.
Well, first of all, his sense of humor, I thought, was so ingratiating, and it wasn't just a surface-level thing. It was very much an integral part of his communication skills.
When I met with Roth at the Simon Wiesen Thal Museum of Tolerance in New York, she said Wiesen Thal's message of tolerance was what moved her to produce the show.
It's also a message that I need to carry on or want to help carry on so that people will forget as time goes on.
These ideals anchor many of Roth's productions, like the 2013 Tony Award-winning musical Kinky Boots.
It sort of combined everything I cared about, accepting people for who they are, trying to find the best life for yourself, finding your bliss, as it were, being true to yourself, and respecting others.
Roth's work spans off-Broadway productions to large commercial Broadway spectaculars and everything in between.
And the in-between for me has the similar thread of all having something to do with our emotional connection to the world.
This diversity has resulted in Roth producing a record 7 Pulitzer Prize-winning plays, but her work in the theater began later in life. She says time shouldn't be a deterrent to following one's dream. For more from Wiesen Thal and Daryl Roth, tune in to Row J and the full broadcast version of the Week in Review.
Thank you, Meredith. Finally, in this week's episode of Up Close, we'll look at 3 very different ideas of feminine roles in morality, religion, and politics. You might not know a lot about nuns, but one woman who's hardly a Catholic Church apologist thinks some nuns are especially worthy of praise. Yahoo Travel managing editor Joe Piazza is the author of If Nuns Ruled the World, 10 Sisters on a Mission. And then, is the situation for women in Israel actually going backwards? Many would argue that's so, and Alana Marilis Stockman puts forth her arguments in The War on Women in Israel, a story of religious radicalism and the women fighting for freedom. But there has been rhetoric about a war on women here in the U.S. too, targeting the Republican Party. One political commentator would like to turn that around and accuse liberals and the Democratic Party of causing harm to women. Fox News contributor and townhall.com news editor Katie Pavlich is author of Assault and Flattery, The Truth About the Left and Their War on Women. Here are some of the highlights from my interview with Joe Piazza. You're embracing the idea of celebrating nuns and celebrating a certain part of Catholicism. That's very, I'd say, very distinct to your generation, to
Absolutely.
your values, right?
Mm-hmm.
Right.
I celebrate these progressive, brave, very fierce nuns in this book. And they're nuns that have gotten in trouble with the Vatican. I mean, we talk about that right off the bat because they're nuns that are out there every day fighting for things the Vatican doesn't necessarily believe in. But I think it's a story that needed to be told for a lot of reasons. One, because these women are so humble. They're never going to tell the stories themselves. They don't go out seeking press. In fact, I had to convince most of them to be in the book with me. And 2, because I think it's important for young Catholic women to hear these stories, to hear stories of brave women in leadership roles in the church, despite the fact that the Vatican won't let them have actual leadership roles.
Many people's expectations of nuns is that they're relatively cloistered, relatively calm and
Exactly.
and not
And boring, kind of boring.
Yeah.
Mm-hmm. This book seeks to shatter those stereotypes in a lot of different ways. So we have nuns. The profiles are very narrative. And so we talk about the things that they do. These are women fighting for social justice. They're fighting for gay rights. One of them fights for abortion rights, which is, hugely controversial in the church. But then I also talk about the human side of them, how they dated before they became nuns, how they came to the decision, how they meditate, how they do yoga, how they go jogging. And I really, it's cheesy to pull an Us Weekly line, right? But it's like nuns, they're just like us.
But one of the fascinating things you delve into is the idea of how nuns came about, in part through an effort to say certain women can have more control over their reproductive lives, right?
Absolutely. I mean, we're looking at nuns coming about in the 2nd, 3rd, and 4th centuries. I mean, that's really when it started, the livelihood started evolving. And becoming a nun, in a way, gave them a sense of freedom because it released them from the patriarchy. It released them from a life where they were going to be pregnant, essentially, for about the 15 years that they had of adulthood because you're constantly giving birth because so many of the babies didn't make it back then. And it let them live their lives. And so we're looking at the ancient society of nuns that were given that kind of freedom. Then we're also looking at a lot of the nuns in my book, who were women that joined in the 30s, 40s, 50s, and 60s, where they didn't have a whole lot of options to go to college, to get master's degrees, to get PhDs, and to live a life where they didn't have to get married and be subjugated to their husband.
You can see the full episode of Up Close on the Jewish channel on cable. You can also listen to the full audio of Up Close as a podcast, available on iTunes or in your favorite podcast player. That's all for this week. From all of us here at the Jewish Channel, be well. The Jewish Channel is available on cable. Time Warner Cable Channel 1640, IOPLink Channel 505, RCN Channel 268, Cox Cable Channel 1, Bright House Channel 330, Verizon Fios Channel 900, and on Comcast on the on-demand menu on premium channels. For more information, visit tjctv.com.